Do you all remember Halo Outpost Discovery in 2019? It was a touring fan experience for Halo fans that was basically Jurassic Park meets Halo in a way. It was basically a dream come true for Halo fans. The event toured multiple cities with many people attending. I personally even attended the one in Philadelphia. It was such a fun event, and everyone I knew that went to it were all looking forward to it to come back in 2020. I remember like a lot of people on the last day I was like, "See you guys next year." Well, 2020 came around and Outpost Discovery didn't come back. There's one thing in particular at Outpost Discovery that really stood out to me, and that was the VR game called Halo Training Grounds. It was basically Halo Slayer in VR with other people in real life. You would play in a room in a small area, and you just basically fight each other like in real life, but in VR. I even did a video not too long ago about that VR game, and basically reminded people that Halo once had a full-fledged multiplayer VR game that has since become lost and forgotten since Outpost Discovery never came back. I was contacted by Jamie Kelly, who is the owner of VR Studios, the studio behind the development of the Halo Training Grounds VR game at Outpost Discovery. He was able to shed some light on the origins of that Halo VR game, what its current status is, and by extension, what happened to Outpost Discovery.
Now, I know you are all eager to learn the truth behind this mystery, but first, there's something else you might also want to learn in this quick message from our sponsor, Boot.dev. Have you ever wanted to learn how to program? Well, Boot.dev is here to help. Yes, I know, learning a whole programming language sounds tedious and boring, but Boot.dev makes it easy and fun by turning the process into something like a video game. With Boot.dev, you can learn multiple languages, including Python, Go, JavaScript, TypeScript, SQL, or C, and learn how to use those for web development, making games, and much more. With how they gamify their courses, you'll never get bored. But of course, the best way to learn programming is simply by doing it and writing code for actual projects, which is what Boot.dev has you doing. Much like a video game, you'll progress through courses like you're completing levels and quests, all while earning XP, achievements, and trying to get a top spot on the global leaderboards. They even have a bi-monthly boss fights where the community works together to gain bonus XP for each completed lesson during the event. If you're ready to take on a new challenge and learn back-end web development, simply go to boot.dev and try out their courses for free. Then use my code Generalkidd to get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan.
So, can you tell me more about yourself and your studio, VR Studios, correct?
Yeah.
And the work that you did before Halo Training Grounds for Outpost Discovery.
Yeah, so in about 2000, I think it was 2010, I had the idea of I want to open a place that people can come and run around and play video games with their body. And VR wasn't a thing back then. So I was talking to two of my friends, and I was saying we should try to build this. And there was no tech. There was no precedent for any of it. There was no business model. There was no insurance for it. There was absolutely nothing. So we spent a couple of years trying to find pieces of tech that could track a player's position and then what their hands are doing, and then somehow render that all on a computer and feed it back to their eyes. And it wasn't long before we realized that what we were actually building was VR. And VR at that point was just a dirty word from the 90s. Nobody liked it. Nobody had a good time with it. It just died out. So we were like, okay, well, let's just take up this decayed mantle of VR and apply it to an out-of-home experience like bowling. And at that same time, Palmer Luckey was on the forum saying, hey, I want to build this headset. I need someone who knows how to manufacture. I want someone who's good at optics. I want a computer vision person. And Dave, who's the one of the co-founders of VR Studios, he reached out to him and was like, we're trying to do this thing, which is a virtual reality arcade. Can we get some of your headsets? And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. We were with Palmer Luckey the moment that his Kickstarter for the Oculus ended. We were in an elevator with him in Seattle. We were going to dinner with him after he showed us the first prototype in the hotel, and he was chanting like 1,000, 1,000, 1,000 because his Kickstarter was funded at 999%, and he really wanted it to be 1,000. Mm-hmm. So we were there the night that it ended, and everything became a whirlwind for him, and we didn't get our headsets early. We got them the same time everyone else did. But Dave was so dialed into what he was doing that he was like, I'll just build my own. So in 2013, Valentine's Day, Dave revealed that he had built us our own headset. And that headset was 3D printed parts screwed to ski goggles with glue, and it had a wireless video receiver, and a wireless video transmitter would be connected to the computer. So then Dave had to go and make VR work inside Unity, which, again, VR wasn't even a concept back then.
Yeah.
So he had to make the left eye and the right eye. He had to set up two different cameras. He had to space them properly. And then he had to create on his own a distortion mesh so that when the images from the screen hit the lenses, they undistorted based on the curvature of the lenses that we bought off of Amazon. And we created a wireless VR system for the head, but in order to track it, we needed technology that didn't exist. So we went down to Natural Point in Oregon. We're in Washington. Went down to Natural Point in Oregon, who makes motion capture cameras. And we were like, this is going to be very expensive, but I think that if we use markers and we attach them to the headset and to the props, we could get position data very quickly. And we went down there and tried their stuff, and we asked them, is anyone playing video games with your stuff? They're like, no, nobody's ever asked us this. So we get an OptiTrack system, and it's about $10,000, and we start setting it up, and we create wireless VR in 2013. So people knew what VR was conceptually, but they'd never tried it. And when they tried our system, they had full position tracking. They were able to walk, so nobody got sick. They had wireless video, so there was no wires tethering them down. And it just started to get a ton of buzz. So from there, it's a very, very long story, but we built the company and brought in CEOs and started developing the tech around the idea that this would be deployed in arcades. And it was the entire vision to create a big arena where multiple people could play. And ultimately, we did that with a game called Power Play, where it was 4-on-4, and the arena was 60 feet long by 40 feet wide. Everyone wore backpacks, and you were able to actually just sprint in VR. It was wild. And you had deathmatch, but it was in VR, and it was with your actual body. And it was after that 343 came to us and said that they're having this event, and they had a VR exhibit, and the exhibitor bowed out, and they needed something that was VR related, and that's the whole second chapter of the story. But that's the whole background. I wanted to just create an arena where people could go and pay money to put on gear and have a physical experience in VR that they couldn't have at home.
So yeah, after like 343 contacted you about that, how long did it take to build Training Grounds? Or like, was that like a crunch or something? Was that like really last minute?
It was last minute, but it wasn't too bad. So we built Power Play with the idea that you could reskin it. So if there was an IP holder that wanted to come to us and say, we want this experience, but we want it to be, Powerpuff Girls or something else, that we could do that. So we were kind of always anticipating that this would happen. What happened is they came and saw the experience. They were just down the street. They came in and we proposed that we reskin Power Play. And they're like, okay, what's this Power Play? And I have the video of 343 playing Power Play for the first time. And the setup is, you have the red team and the blue team, and they're in this big arena. And you have your intros of like the red team, blue team. But the thing that kind of tied it all together was the caster, which was my job, where I would be on a headset and I would be casting the match, and they would be able to hear my voice. Everyone sitting in the spectator area would be able to hear my voice, and everyone in the spectator area would be able to hear their voice over voice chat. So anytime that you're playing the game and you do something, like you get a headshot on someone, there's always an announcer who's calling you out by name and being like, you did blah, 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 this is awesome. And it made it kind of like a sporting event, which is exactly what I always wanted it to be. At the same time, the caster's able to guide people through, like, oh no, this is how you have to do it, make sure that you don't touch the walls, blah, blah, blah. But for 343, because of the nature of their gaming prowess, there was none of this hand-holding. They just instantly took to it. and it was just this casting experience. They got out and they were like, "Yeah, we could see this working for Halo." And we had a meeting in the conference room, and they made a joke, and they're like, "Hey, Jamie, you could come with us to every single city and be the announcer." Because the point was that they partnered with Hershend Entertainment,
Hmm.
which also owns like the Harlem Globetrotters, and they do a bunch of these events. And Hershend was they do this all the time. So they have a whole crew of people in every single state that they'd go to. And the idea of us going was kind of silly because they would have it handled. But I ended up going to every single one because the technical feat of getting these to run was very, very high. But while I was there, I also did the casting. So this joke in the conference room of like, you should come to every single one and do casting. That's exactly what happened.
So you were actually casting at all the events? That was actually you?
Yeah, so it wasn't. So there's two stations at every event,
Hmm.
so I can't, obviously watch both of them. And then, there's times when I needed to take breaks. So they had their own staff there that would do this casting, but nobody has. And this is one of the big problems with a virtual reality arcade that has something like a casting component. You can't rely on kids that just got out of high school to be super hyped all day to make this amazing
Hmm.
experience with their voice. So as soon as anyone else got involved, it just wasn't the same. Uh, it, it was just this dull experience of people just going out and shooting. So I was like, guys, you gotta cast, you gotta do the play by play. So yeah, I was there for every single one, and that was a big component of it, because when you're sitting in line for 4 hours and you're just watching the monitors, you need to be given context to
Hmm.
what's happening. But also, when you do something amazing in the game, having someone recognize that is critical. So 343 said, "Okay, let's reskin this," and they're like, "We have a bunch of guidelines that we have to do, and you have to adhere to because it's the Halo property." But none of this stuff obviously was meant to work in Unity. So 343 had all of the files of the maps from Bungie, but it was all a mess because they weren't using it. It was just this like archive of 3ds Max files
Hmm.
and whatnot. So they started giving me these maps, and I was like, I guess I'll put them in Unity. And Unity just didn't know what to do with them. Bungie made these trigger volumes all throughout the levels. The player goes here and this happens. Once they're in this volume, then this happens. And Unity just interpreted those as boxes with collision. So there's just these boxes everywhere. So they gave me Valhalla, and I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I can work with this. And I had to kind of reverse engineer the way Bungie laid out the textures, and I had to rebuild the river, and I had to replace all of the trees and redo all of the materials. So I built that level. I did the aesthetics for it and the lighting, and rebuilt it from scratch essentially. And they'd keep coming in and they'd keep doing reviews where they'd have their artists come in and be like, yeah, this is on brand, this looks good. We had a lot of discussion about the way that the avatars looked, how the plasma pistol looks, and we had the actual 3D models from Bungie that we were like putting into Unity, and it's not meant to be put into Unity. So you grab the plasma pistol in VR and you line it up with the hand, and you're like, and you adjust the scale, and you're like, yep, this is freaking it. This is the plasma pistol. So then the guys on the team had to build all of the charge up sound. Well, not the sounds. We got the sounds from them as well, but like the charge up effects, the particle effects, the mechanics, the cooldown, the animations. They built all of that. And it came together pretty quickly because the fundamental of the game was already made. The things that were different were the walls coming up. In Power Play, you were
Oh
just
yeah.
given a wall
Hmm.
configuration, and then you play around that. This idea that every 60 seconds the walls would change was brand new completely new to Halo. And then the respawning, how you respawn, the damage detection, all of that stuff was from Power Play. And then the Halo-ish stuff like charging your plasma pistol or your shield regeneration or the HUD or the sound effects, that was all just put in. So even though we had a very tight timeline, it came together very quickly, and it wasn't a stressor really at all to actually build the thing.
So you said it was like built in Unity. Was it entirely Unity, or is there any other kind of like tool sets or like middleware that was kind of used?
So we have our own software called AMP, the attraction management platform. It's what you need if you're an arcade operator to run, a piece of software across 8 backpacks, checking the battery levels of all the backpacks, being able to remote into them and control them, everything that you would need for that. But it also does something where when the game starts, it looks for AMP in order to, set up the networking, in order to sync itself with the state, all of these little things. So it's not something that would just run on its own. It's looking for AMP to run because it needs to orchestrate all 8 players. In this case, it was 6 players. And then from there, it was just Unity. So it was all Unity and our own stuff, from our own networking
Mm-hmm.
to our own AMP integration.
So the game was 3v3 at Outpost Discovery, but did it or like could it support other modes like 4v4 or like 1v1s, for example?
Yeah. So 1v1s, we actually did a few of those. All you have to do is have 2 players. One player walks into the red zone, one player walks into the blue zone. We tested with 8 players because Power Play was 8 players.
Ah.
But Power Play was built on that massive 2,400 square foot footprint because we were using $300,000 worth of motion capture cameras.
Mm-hmm.
When the Vive came out and it had the base stations, the 2.0 base stations, you now had 30 feet by 30 feet that if you were creative with the positioning, you could get. So we had to shrink down Power Play from 60 by 40 to 30 by 30, which, considering the cost savings, is well worth it. But what you get when you shrink the play space down is it's not fun to have that many players. You do not want 8 players in a 30 by 30. 6 players is pushing it, but because the game is so naturally defensive and you're like taking cover, it worked. But even with 3 on 3 in a 30 by 30, people were still kind of backing into each other and bumping into each other, which is just a problem in VR. It's very difficult to tell you that someone's behind you. So that was the max limit for comfort and safety, but you could go up to many more players if you wanted to. Everyone needs, their computer registered in AMP, a headset, a version of the software, which is also distributed by AMP, and then the game itself needs to have its cap lifted, and you just keep adding players.
Oh wow. So hypothetically, if someone were to like run like a huge like stadium, they could have like 20v20 or something like that in theory.
So it all comes down to the headset's ability to track in a large space and its ability to communicate with all of the other ones. So in the situation with the Vive, it wouldn't be possible because the base stations only go up to 30 by 30. 40 by 40 really is I think is what we did. It's like 36 by 36 is what we did for Halo. But now you have headsets like the Quest 3 that can track inside out. They can track their own space. They don't need external sensors, but even that has a limit. That's the first thing I did when I got my Quest 3. Is I just went to a big open space, because that's where my mind's been for the last decade. I'm like, how big can this go? And it goes to 30 by 30, and it just caps itself. And Meta isn't interested in location-based entertainment use with their headset, whereas HTC is. And the HTC Vive Focus 3, which I have here, is not a great headset, but it's designed for LBE, which means that location-based entertainment is able to take advantage of its inside-out tracking and its large-scale space. But the big thing that AMP did and the networking layer did that is very difficult to do even now is the headset needs to be able to tell the other headsets where it is in space. Mm-hmm. They don't talk with each other. There's no triangulation. You need to have a unified calibration that everyone shares, and then everyone reports, I am within these coordinates in this calibration. And as soon as that gets off a little bit, if someone's calibration adjusts, then everything gets thrown off. So what you need is the ability to track in a very large space reliably. You need networking so that no matter where the players are, they have a strong network connection to receive the state of the game from the server. And you need the ability to communicate with all of the other players, which your headset needs to be built for, or you do what we did and you have to create your own software that manages all of that.
I see. So it sounds like with modern headsets, it wouldn't really be ideal anymore to use them with this game, would it? with the more modern ones?
You could do, in theory, you could take the Quest and you could have some co-location features turned on, which Meta is real weird. They're like, hey man, we'll let you share the spatial coordinates that you've created with another headset, and then both of you could play together, even though there doesn't seem to be any software that really takes advantage of that, if you give us access to those coordinates. It's this weird like trade-off, and I don't think anyone's actually used the co-location stuff yet. Maybe they have, but if you had that and the limit was, let's call it 30 feet, because I know that's what it is right now, you could have two players fighting each other in the same physical space. Now, of course, if you did it over the network, everyone could have their own space, and then over the network, you could now melee each other. It's one of the reasons you're not allowed to melee, is because you'd actually hit them. Now you could. But you'd still need your own big space. And then you're like, okay, well, what if you're in a swivel chair and you're using your control stick to move your character? And that could work. It'd be like a normal VR game. But as you experienced, there's something magical about just standing there and being able to walk and being able to aim and lean and like close one eye and aim down the sides or like turn around quickly that the stick just doesn't give.
Yeah.
So if you really wanted to recreate the experience, the easiest way would be everyone has their own 30 feet by 30 feet space and it's a networked game and you physically, run around. That would be the closest thing.
That would actually be really cool if like a lot of like arcades around the world had that like set up, the 30 feet by 30 feet, and then like players just like connect with each other that way.
Yep. That was the entire basis of the company. The idea is that you would have multiple sites. So the company started as VRcade. We were so early that we were able to trademark the name VRcade.
Oh, wow.
And we were so early that we were able to trademark the name VR Studios. That's when the execs came in and they were like, we're not going to do VRcade anymore. We're like, what? It's a perfect name. And they're like, it's too hard to defend. Everyone's using it. And every time they do, we have to pay our attorneys to send them a cease and desist letter. And if they don't, and we don't defend our trademark, then it becomes a problem. Everyone starts using it. So we were that early. And early on in VRcade, the idea was you would go to a VRcade and you would network with other VRcades. And there's so many cool things you could do, from, battles where Seattle fights Anaheim, or, multiple cities fight, and you give them their own flag and give them their own avatar outfit. You hold qualifications and tournaments so that you can actually establish that you are the best in your community and you're going to represent your community. And then the spectating and casting options were wild. To be able to have 4 players in one state and 4 players in another state, and to have live feeds of both of their arenas, but then also have the server's view of what everyone's doing. It would be fantastic. The infrastructure is the problem. The cost is probably the biggest problem. And then around that, you have the fact that you can't trust, especially at places where there's alcohol, you can't trust people to wear $4,000 worth of hardware and not wreck it. We did a lot of installations at Dave & Buster's, and there's plenty of times when someone would just run into a physical wall. Even though we put up the grids, even though we set up the alarms, even though the ground that you're standing on is floating and you don't want to go over there, they would just head first into it, and this $1,200 headset just falls apart, and they're just like, oh, man, sorry, and they leave. And you're like, who pays for this? But what's changing now is you now have the Quest, and people are able to have their own Quest, and then you have the Quest 3S, which is very affordable. The idea of someone coming into a venue with their own headset and being able to not have to put on a backpack, not have to connect to a computer, and just somehow download the calibration of that area and the game and then play it there would be awesome. Meta's not interested in that at all. They don't want that. That doesn't suit their business. And so it's really frustrating that this headset that you have at home,
Yeah, it's like so perfect.
legally, you're not allowed to go to an arcade and use it.
It sounds like a huge like missed opportunity there for them.
Yep.
So I guess you kind of already mentioned some of this, but like, what were some of the like other challenges with building this as like an in-person multiplayer VR game? or just like the whole like Halo theme and all that. Like, were there any like challenges to getting all that done?
So the biggest challenge is that the people that are going to be playing have never played anything like this before. They understand conceptually what it means. Everyone had the exact same reaction. I heard it thousands of times. The Halo Training Grounds screen, the title screen comes up. I can see on the server that, okay, all 6 players are loaded in, their names are here, and I'm looking out in the space, and everyone's just standing still, and I'm like, they're looking at the title screen, and in 3, 2, 1, and everyone goes, whoa, at the same time. And what you're doing is you're introducing them to a completely new world that has different prompts for the user experience. You know, what does this sound mean? What does this color mean? They have to trust that they can actually walk around, which is weird for a lot of people. There's no control stick that they're using. They just actually have to walk. Then when there's multiple people in there, they try to touch each other. And they're like, whoa, you're actually there. So there's this curve of, you know, getting adapted to the world to the point where obviously the plasma pistol shoots straight. We didn't screw that up. It shoots straight. The geometry of the plasma pistol is weird. It's curved and like alien. Mm-hmm. So people will start firing it and like, oh, it doesn't shoot straight. It's like, you've never held a plasma pistol. You clearly don't know how to make it shoot straight. All you have to do is close one eye, aim it with your dominant eye, pull the trigger, and adjust. And what you'll see is that we've lined up the curvature of the top of it right with the barrel. It makes perfect sense. But it's this skill that, because it doesn't work exactly the way they thought it would in the real world, they just assume it's broken. So you have to just tell them no. That's the biggest challenge, is getting these people their kind of VR legs, not just because it's VR, but because there's all of these mechanics that we have to introduce to them. The idea that you can back into someone and they're actually there. The idea that you're playing with people who are actually there, that's a wild idea for most people. And again, it's for a lot of those people, it was their first time in VR. But we did a very good job, and I know we did a very good job because there were so many people who went in, it was their first time, and they took to it like a fish to water. Mm-hmm. All of their years of playing Halo Deathmatch and Slayer, you can see it in their body language. You can see the way that they move. You can see the way that they pre-charge their plasma pistol. You can see the way that they take cover. They can't jump. They can't melee. They don't have grenades. But their body language is like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I am dialed in. And they would get the results that you'd expect. And that's how you know that you've successfully integrated the human into the machine. And it was nice because that's the kind of place where almost everyone who's attending that knows what Halo is and plays Halo, rather than like, oh, this looks fun, let's go try this, honey. And they are like, I don't know what's happening. I'm so scared. I'm very confused. So it was a nice audience to be able to do that, which is why that went so smoothly. The biggest challenges outside of that is the technical side. The ballet that needs to happen to make this run is exhausting, especially when you are tearing it down and setting it up. You have new staff, you have new Wi-Fi interference, you have hardware that just got delivered off of a truck from the third city that it was in. Like that was a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. Were there like any common or frequent issues like you encountered like running the game at events, like were like crashes or like any like freezes or just anything that held it up?
Yeah, Steam VR is awful. Steam VR is awful. It's always been awful. It's been a part of my life for the last decade. I cannot believe how unreliable it is. And even now at work, because I still do VR stuff, I try to use Steam Link, and the picture's amazing, the latency's low, and it's super stable, but it's so hard for it to communicate with the headset. Your client, there's a client mismatch. You're going to have to exit the app. I'm in VR. You exit the app. No, I can see the app, but it is a mismatch. If you can see the app, restart it. No, you have to take the headset off. And it was like it was the same thing at Halo. It was, oh, there's been a critical error. Restart Steam. How about you restart yourself? Like, we're at a venue with so much going on, and player three's computer randomly decides to have a Steam VR error, and you restart it, and surprise, surprise, there's no problem whatsoever. It was just the software. So that was incredibly infuriating, but there were also hardware issues. We had to 3D print brackets that would mount to the cords to make sure that you couldn't accidentally unplug the HDMI cable or the USB cable, which meant that if the cable actually started breaking for some reason, you had to take screwdrivers out to take apart the 3D printed plastic, unseat it, reseat it. The computer would insist that, unplugging it from one end isn't good enough. You got to unplug it from the other end. Sometimes the USB-C, even though it's supposed to be, you can plug it in either way, you actually have to rotate it a bit and then put it back in. And then you try to teach all these troubleshooting steps to the staff, and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. Like, we usually just stand here and hand out tickets. Like, we don't know what you're doing. So there's the hardware itself, the fans in the backpack. These things are overworked, so one backpack might start making a ton of noise. The routers, I remember at one venue, as soon as we set up, one of the routers just instantly died. It was like, I've had enough. And so we had a spare, and we had to get the software downloaded from the first router and then put it on the second one. And it's all meticulous. There's a whole IP identification thing, and Windows would want to update. And so we just had to be like, no, you can't update. Lots and lots of problems like that. Sometimes the networking wouldn't work where one player wouldn't load in. And so you have to tell everyone, just hang on a second, we're trying again. It was like that all the time. And there were two systems. So I'm bouncing back and forth. People are like, Jamie, everyone's head is in the ground. I'm like, okay, I know what that is. Hang on. Jamie, this person doesn't have sound. They can't hear me. Okay, I know what that is. And it was so stressful, and it was so much work. And that's the ultimate reason why I had to go. And I'm glad that I did, because it would have just been shut down otherwise. So yeah, it was a real challenge to get it to work. And it was mostly because of the VR hardware and Steam VR.
Were there any early concepts you had for the VR game that didn't quite make it in, but if you had more time, you would have added it?
So not necessarily more time. Hershend is a very family-focused company. Mm-hmm. So the reason that we went with a plasma pistol is because it was an energy weapon and not bullets.
Right.
Originally, I think that we were messing around with the pistol, which would have been great, but we couldn't put it in. So pistol was out, plasma weapon was in, but we want a straightforward weapon, so not the needler, not a two-handed weapon, so plasma pistol. And it was also aligned well with the arm cannon that we had in Power Play. So that was one decision. The other ones are around no blood. Everyone just had to kind of explode into pieces like they're robots rather than actual people. But it was actually pretty straightforward. It was a very natural thing to be like, we're going to change the level every 60 seconds. We're going to make everyone vulnerable for a bit, and then it's going to come back up. When you die, you got to go back to the spawn zone. So no, there wasn't a whole lot. It really didn't matter where the map was. I was given a few other maps, and it didn't matter because I couldn't get them to work. But the biggest thing is, no matter where you are, you're going to be on a floating platform.
Right.
So who cares? I think that we wanted to have Halo music, but I think that might have been the one thing where if we had more time, we could have really improved the intro, the whole onboarding experience. You'd hear the Halo theme and you'd be like, okay, I'm ready to go. Right now it just kind of starts and there's no music. You just hear the natural birds and the wind and the trees, which is fine. That works just fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a whole lot of things that we would have done that we could have done within spec that we couldn't do just because of time.
My friend and I noticed that while playing at Outpost Discovery that it was possible to blow up some of the vehicles around the map. What was the reason behind that little extra detail?
So I believe that was Blake. He's our sound guy. He also did a lot of coding. And there was a day when we got those meshes, but the meshes themselves were in pieces. So you had the Warthog, then you had the cannon, then you had the wheels. And I think he was just like, I could just make this blow up if you shoot it. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. And it was such a hit in the office. It would start smoking. So it would make a sound when you shot it that is the impact sound that you'd hear in the game. So instantly you're like, oh, I'm doing damage to this thing. And then it had quite a bit of health. So in the beginning, we would tell people while they were playing, shoot the warthogs, which was great because it got people acclimated to kind of looking at the same thing. It got them used to firing at the same thing. And then, of course, when it blew up, everyone's like, whoa, and they understood the speed of the weapon and how to aim it and all of this other stuff. But we didn't think about any of that when we created it.
Mhm.
Blake was just like, I can make this blow up. And we're like, okay. And it blew up. We're like, that's cool. And that was it. That's as simple as that.
Yeah, I remember like while we were like just waiting for it to set up, like some people just like start shooting at the vehicles randomly, and then everyone was like totally wowed by that. It's just and then just start trying to shoot like everything else on the map to see like what happens.
Yeah.
Were there like any plans for this game after Outpost Discovery? Like any plans for like a public release with like online multiplayer at some point or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so it's a weird thing with Halo, and I don't know if it's still the same now, but we actually tried doing Halo VR years ago, and what happened is a bunch of people at 343 and Microsoft, they just got their hands all over it, and it just started like this internal scuffle. And so upper management was like, nope, we're not doing this. You guys, you're like a bunch of children. So everyone just wanted a piece of it. So it just died. We didn't do anything wrong. So when this opportunity came back, they were like, oh yeah, I remember you guys. But the scope of this was purely for this 4 year show. Every year for the next 4 years, 19, 20, 21, and 22, they would be having this Outpost Discovery. And there were talks of getting it into a Dave and Buster's, and we were very, very close. But that whole like red tape, everyone wanting to for it to be just right, like it never quite aligned. Like it's such a slow moving process, even though it would have been just a perfect fit. We were already doing power play in their 30 by 30 conference rooms, and now it's just Halo instead. And it would have been in Florida. There are two locations in Florida, I believe it was. But outside of that, you'd have to rebuild the whole thing because it wasn't meant for stick controls. It wasn't meant for online multiplayer, and that was kind of a conversation that we'd be having is if we were to release this, what would be the point? Because if you don't have a bunch of friends to play with, if you're not at a venue, then you're now programming bots, and you quickly realize that the magic of it was the space that you could move around in and the social aspect. Being at home in a 30-foot by 30-foot space while you're sitting in your chair using a stick, you're like, this is boring. There's nothing to this. But the Dave and Buster's connection would have been very, very powerful. But none of that stuff took off, primarily because everything was cut short because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it was just a very slow moving process because when you have an IP like that, everyone's just very careful.
Yeah. Oh man, it would have been like a dream come true if it happened. Like I would have flown to Florida like monthly just to play that.
I know. I know.
Do you think like it could ever happen again one day, or is that pretty much just like shelved permanently?
So, Hershend, I believe they're like at the top of the food chain for this experience. Somewhere out there, there's either storage units or shipping containers absolutely full of backpacks, batteries, controllers, headsets, computers, base stations, and it's just sitting on all of that doing nothing. The problem is that it requires AMP, and AMP isn't around anymore. So if you tried to start Halo as it is, it would never be able to connect to other players. You'd just walk around by yourself. And because of that missing infrastructure, you just flat out can't play it today. So it would take someone stepping up and saying, we want to recreate this for some location-based entertainment facility, which means you also need the hardware infrastructure. You need a headset that will work. You need a networking backend. You need that middleware that handles the communication between players. And I don't know how interested anyone is in that.
So like Amp's not something that can be just run offline or anything. It's like a actually like a live service kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's an offline mode, but it has to hit AWS to get a token that validates it for, I think it's like 2 weeks. And this is to make sure that if you're a venue, you're paying your bill and that you have the latest version of stuff. So offline mode doesn't work. I downloaded it actually the other day because I was like, I wonder if I could just get Halo running again, and it won't even get me to the login screen. But this is the kind of stuff we were talking about on a text message thread. Dave is like, I was like, does it require AMP? And Dave's like, yeah, it requires AMP. And Blake is like, we could just comment out some code and it won't require AMP. And then Joe, who's at Joe and Dave, two of the guys that worked on it, Dave, of course, one of the co-founders, they work at Unity now in the XR group. And Joe's like, it'd be real interesting to try to get these running on the Quest 3. But it's not about getting it running. It's about the business side of it and who's paying for it and who's hiring the staff to actually run it and how much money can it make and what's it tied into in the bigger picture. Are you selling microtransactions? Is it a user account? What's the point of it? What's the upkeep every year? What's the expense? And people like you and me too are just like, I just want to play the game. Why is it so complicated? Just give me a space and just let me turn it on.
Please.
I know. That's way more complicated than that.
So, where is like the game itself today? Like, is it still like out there? Like, are there still copies of it around or anything? Like you said, you just recently downloaded it again or something.
Yeah, I downloaded AMP, and I couldn't log in. And from AMP, you can download the VRcade games, but they're all on AWS, which nobody's paying for anymore. So the company went under during COVID. All of our clients obviously were like, well, we can't make money. Nobody wants to put on a headset with COVID going around, and our local governments are shutting us down, so we can't stay open anyway. So the company died. And when the company died, the debt holders, or the people who loaned us money, they were like, okay, well, now we just get to take everything. So they took every computer, every pen, and every title. And Halo's weird because it wasn't quite ours, but it was. And it wasn't quite 343's in Microsoft, but it kind of was. And it was mostly Hershen's, but how much do they own? So I don't know how clear this was ever defined about who owns what. But the fact that the company's gone and there's rights to it that are, being nebulous, it's hard to tell, where it is right now. And like I said, it exists on those computers, but who knows where those are? If those got auctioned off, then, who knows who has those.
So it's like some random person just like at an auction sale just got like the lucky like build or something.
Yep. Yeah, and they wouldn't be able to play it. That's the other thing is you need to start it through AMP, and even if they knew to open AMP, they couldn't log in. And if they found the executable, they'd run it, and the game just breaks because when it starts, it needs to start with a bunch of flags that says you were started with AMP, you're going to do all of these things. So you can't just double click the executable and start playing. And not to mention the networking of all of the other players. You can't just have two separate computers on the same network and run the Unity executable and expect it to work. So there's nowhere that this thing can run right now. It would have to be completely rebuilt.
Do you think there's any chance like any component of this or the full game or anything could ever resurface again someday at all in any way, shape,
I mean,
or form?
there's people in. It's weird with the whole 343 shakeup. A lot of people that we knew there left, or they got fired or whatever. So it's hard to tell, especially as time passes, how many people that are in charge of those decisions actually remember it. There's a lot of videos out there and a lot of reactions. I have some videos as well. I interviewed a group of guys after they got done playing it, and they're all the same. You can tell that there's a huge appetite for this. So if someone wanted to kind of resurrect this idea, they have a great set of data to show that there is still an appetite for this kind of thing. But again, how much money can it make? How much money is enough to put into the development of it? And then there's also something kind of magical about how long it took for a person to play it at Outpost Discovery. If you were there and you were able to play it all day, there are some people, maybe even you, who would be like, I'm just doing this all day. But the scarcity and like the few times that you got to play was like just the right amount to never be like, oh, this is boring. Oh, this is the same thing. Oh, I wish I had different weapons. I wish I had a different biome. Or, oh, I wish I could throw grenades. Like, it's just enough so that the scope of what it was is fine. And as soon as you open that up and you can play as much as you want more. You want to be able to tie into your actual Halo account, and you want your avatar from Halo Infinite to be represented here, and you want to be able to have a two-handed prop that you can hold, and you want to be able to somehow do melee, and you want to be able to have sticky grenades, and you want to have all of this stuff. And again, it comes down to cost. Can this thing sustain itself when it's this basic? What are you charging? How much does the hardware cost? And if someone was able to say, we have a deal with Meta, they're fine with people bringing their own headsets. We've manufactured a piece of software that is able to upload the game temporarily to people's headsets and is able to calibrate them to the space. And then we're charging, $15 per game, and we're having tournaments, and like, it's a really hard puzzle to solve to justify it. And when you start looking at the cost of square footage at any place, especially at Dave and Buster's, the way they look at it is like, okay, I got this Pac-Man versus machine. It takes up this much floor space. It generates this much money. I have this Time Crisis machine. I have this Star Wars machine. And they're like, okay, that means in a 30-foot by 30-foot space, I can make, $15,000 a day. Now, you want to put a VR attraction there, you would have to sell 1,000 games a day. The timetables don't even work. You couldn't satisfy that demand. No thanks. And that's what it comes down to. Meanwhile, if you get some, podunk place out in the middle of nowhere, you're relying on people to come and keep playing the same game, make the drive out, pay the entry fee, and play the same game. And if their friends aren't coming out or there isn't a group there, then the game's not that much fun because there's nothing to do. And you can start to see how it all falls apart. And the Halo Outpost Discovery was a perfect storm of, you have Halo fans, they need to be wowed by something that they can't get at home. This is a special treat for them. This is a captive audience. Boom. Perfect. It doesn't need to generate X amount of dollars. It's free to all attendees. It is the reason that this was able to exist in the first place.
Right. Well, if it ever happened, I know I'll definitely be there, like, very,
Yeah.
very often. Like, you said, like, you need, like, 1,000, like, plays per day. I'd probably be, like, a significant fraction of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a real workout too, especially when you start getting in with other people who are as good as you are moving, and the headsets get super gross. But if it's your own headset, then
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah, exactly. All right. I believe that's all the questions for today. Thank you for answering them.
Yep.
We just learned about the fascinating origins of the only true Halo VR game to ever exist, as well as the ambitious and dream come true kind of plans that almost happened for it after Outpost Discovery. And of course, what we assumed happened to Outpost Discovery was more or less confirmed. COVID-19 didn't just cause Outpost Discovery to be canceled for a year or two. It canceled Outpost Discovery, period. And the Halo Training Grounds VR game, it's still out there somewhere, in a container somewhere owned by Hirsch and Live. As for actual builds of the game, so far no one has ever come forward with builds of the game, unfortunately. But, as it turns out, the game just simply wouldn't work anymore. It's a shame, really. So much potential with Outpost Discovery, and so much potential with in-person Halo VR events. We were supposed to have at least 4 years of Outpost Discovery and Halo VR. And then after that, we could have had even more of that in, like, Dave and Buster's everywhere. It could have been like a truly, like, huge continuing thing, a really long-term thing. And I truly do hope that one day Halo Outpost Discovery can come back, or at least some form of it. But at least we now know what happened to all that, and the mystery has finally been cleared up. If you all enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and most importantly, let's all talk about this in the comments down below. I'm sure a lot of you definitely have your own thoughts on this, and your own opinions as well. Perhaps, if we called on Halo Studios to bring back events like this, maybe they'll see there's still a lot of interest from the Halo fans. So, let me know your thoughts on all this, and thank you for joining me tonight.